Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments Midweek Model Meet. I am ridiculously wearing a cardigan in the middle of July because it is cold here. It's not horribly cold, but just too cold to be wearing a t-shirt, which just doesn't seem right. But anyhow, welcome to the midweek. And we should have a couple of people on tonight. The first of which is already here, and that's Jamie. Welcome.
Hello, mate. Have I got my microphone on this time?
You do.
Yes. Excellent.
So I think Jen might be popping in as well. I know she was a little bit time limited in terms of the start, so she said hopefully she would get back in time. So hopefully she'll be joining us, and we'll see who else turns up as well. But this week we're actually, well, first of all, let me go to the chat and say hello to people. So we have David Markey, Idwar Williams, Steve, Gremlins Modeling Mayhem, Julian, do you know who that is? Kirchball, and Richard Hughes, Taggers. Got some good regulars on tonight. I've lost my place now saying that. Tuesday, Davros Halfbeard, welcome. Mark Stott, good to see you. And that brings us up, Ian Allison as well, just at the end there. Brings me up to date. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming over tonight. Welcome if you are lurking and not in the chat. Don't feel afraid. You won't get called out on anything unless you specifically want to be, or say something really horrible. That I don't suggest. As always, if you've got a question or a comment, please put it in capital letters, really nice and big, so we can see it, because it's difficult when you don't have a production team like big YouTube channels have and can employ somebody just to look at comments. We have to do chatting and looking at that, which is, as you know, because we're men, difficult to do more than one thing at a time. Anyway, how are you, Jamie? How's things?
Oh, I'm good, mate, actually. Yeah. Just struggling a bit with the model that's on the bench at the moment, which is the Kinetic Sea Harrier. Literally blood, sweat and tears.
Dear.
I've got 2 scalpel cuts on my fingers, and it's embedded in some of the filler. Yeah. But, weirdly enjoying it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
challenging. That's the word.
It is challenging, but then when you beat the challenge, it's arguably more satisfying than doing a sort of Tamiya kit that just falls together without any effort whatsoever.
Yeah. So, yeah. The different kinds of satisfaction, aren't they? It's I've got a project that I started ages ago, probably a year ago or so now, which is a pair of Doras, Focke-Wulf FW-190Ds. I think one's the D9, one's the D11. One is the Tamiya kit, both 48 scale. One is the Dragon kit. They're both nice kits in their own way. But Tamiya kit, like you say, it just goes together like a dream. It's no problem at all. It's beautiful. And then the satisfaction is, doing the painting, doing the decaling, making it look nice, all that. The Dragon kit doesn't do that.
No. The
Dragon kit is beautifully detailed, but it doesn't fit together. So the challenge is, how do I make it go together and still preserve the detail so I can get to that point of doing it beautifully, which took a while, and I kind of got there, but then I got distracted on other things. So one is painted and partially decaled. The other one is pre-shaded. In the way that we have discussed before. Ready for its sort of marbling bit, and then I shall paint that one, decal it and everything. So I just need to find the kind of mojo for that to finish it. But yeah, I mean, very similar aircraft, very different builds.
Yeah. See, my take on it is, even if I've got an older kit in my stash that's been superseded by a new one, I'll always build the new one.
Yeah.
I just won't bother with it, because I know I'll have an easier time and I'll have a nicer result with the brand new, version of it.
Yeah.
It's why I built a couple of Edward Spitfire Mark 5s rather than the Airfix one. It's more detailed. It's, arguably a better fit. All right, it's more fiddly, but I know I'm going to get a better result at the end of it, and I don't mind more.
Well, and the other thing is actually less expensive. So
because it's interesting actually, because Jen she's doing another beginner series,
the P51,
P51 by Airfix, which is the same price as the Edward Weekend Edition, which is what the Airfix kit is, obviously, because it hasn't got any canopy mask, because it hasn't got any photo etch in it. So they are equivalent, and they're the same price. And the Edward kit is a far superior kit. Now, the Airfix kit is nice, but the Edward kit is beautiful. And I know which one I would choose.
I guess but are the Edward decals the new? Well, I would say they're not new now, are they? But the newer type, or are they the older screen printed ones?
I think it probably depends what boxing you get. Now, I've got the Royal class of the D, and I got that as soon as it was released. I had it on pre-order, and I don't know. After all that rambling, building it up, I don't know. I think, was the Spitfire Mark 1 the first one with the new decals?
Possibly.
So if the Mustang predates the Spitfire, then the boxing I've got will have the old decals.
Yeah, because I mean that arguably is a point in favour of the Airfix kits, because cartograph decals, particularly the ones that the Airfix supply, are superb.
Yeah,
without a doubt, I would say the best decals in the business at the moment.
Yeah, but the the new Edward ones, the new Edward ones, the ones you're getting in the later kit, they're improving all the time.
Yeah,
I used them on the Avia S199, and I used some on the 109F in 72nd, and they were really good. And
I just think they jumped the gun with the release of them. I think they should have got the technology perfected. You say they're getting better and better. To me, that would be like that's in the back, because didn't they use cartograph before?
They did, but
I
think
so. It's just like you're already using the best available. If you've got something else which you're developing, get it to that level where you can replace them.
Yeah, but cartograph have a cheaper version and a more expensive version, and I think Airfix used the expensive one, and I think Edward were using the cheaper ones, which are slightly thicker. In it, but I do remember struggling to hide some carrier film on a ME 110 cartograph Edward decals, because they were really quite thick. They settled into the panel lines lovely, but just trying to get rid of that carrier film, even under the varnish, I could still see it. So, but that was over 10 years ago. So I guess even cartograph are improving, if that's possible.
Well, I mean, an interesting. We will get to the topic of tonight. Don't worry, people. We'll get there eventually. It's our usual preamble.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing is, people, and I've had this on videos before. I'm sure you've seen it on videos. Insert the company name here, but you'll get the comment, "I hate whatever company." Airfix get it a lot. Revell get it a lot. I would say probably more deservedly than Airfix. Hobby Boss trumpeter, I see it with as well.
Yeah.
Don't really see it about Tamiya. Edward, yeah, you get it sometimes about, Edward, I'm not sure about the fit and, the decals are horrible, that kind of thing. So, yeah, people often get that. But then you think, well, what Airfix are you talking about? What Revell what point in history? When are you talking? You're talking now? It's like, because, if you're a modeler, there's not a lot that Airfix are doing wrong for you. As a retailer, it's a different story. Yeah, there are some things that they're doing wrong for modelers, but it's like with ICM. I think ICM are absolutely fantastic. If you're talking about a 2000 ICM kit, that's a slightly different proposition than a 2024. If you're thinking about late 90s, I don't think they even really consider that is the current ICM. So I think you have to be specific. You can't just say Edward decals are rubbish. It's like, well, if you say that and then somebody has a kit which has the cartograph decals in, they're just like, well, what are people talking about? So, yeah. But as always, people just like to have mass generalizations. It's one of the things that, from an evolutionary perspective, has served us well in various factors. It just doesn't necessarily do so well in current social engagement.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, the subject tonight, hopefully Jen will get on at some point, because it was kind of inspired by Jen. As I put up, let me see if I can do something clever and actually show rather than tell, but that would require me to actually have some stuff up and ready, which I don't. So bear with me. But it was really inspired by, hold your breath, pause the video so I don't get any streaming issues, and share this screen. This. So this review, the discount Dora, is on the Forces of Valor, which then became Waltersons, both, I think, probably the same Chinese company, which, when I saw Forces of Valor, I automatically thought, oh, it's a US company. When I saw Waltersons, it's like, oh, okay, it's a US company. It's not. It's based out of Hong Kong. And this is a really basic kind of, well, I would say it's a Focke-Wulf 190D, but it has some definite accuracy issues. The panel lines are a little not soft. They're not Matchbox level of thickness and softness, but they are certainly not, Tamiya or ICM or Airfix levels of sharp either. The pilot is basically disposable. It's just a blob, but it does have, reasonable detail. Cannon blister's completely wrong. Shape of some elements looks a little weird, but it's difficult to tell until it's built. But it is also £6 for a 1/72nd scale kit. With reasonable detail, low part count. It's got about 40 parts. So that's a different value proposition than if it was £15. So this is actually one of the cheapest kits, I think, that I know of. So the question then became, and Jen actually said, well, why don't we get a bunch of us together and build it and see what we think, and see if it's suitable for beginners? Because to me, there are a couple of reasons to have kits like this, and that is, one, if they go together well, ideal as a first kit for somebody, especially a younger modeler who isn't bothered about accuracy. They just want to put together something, paint it, fly it around. It's ideal for that. And the other thing is for trying out stuff that you don't want to try out on a, let's say, decent model. And let me remove that from the stage. get rid of it. What are your thoughts, Jamie? Specifically on this kit, but then we'll talk about more generally cheap kits.
Yeah, I guess it all hinges on how it goes together, doesn't it? If it's £6 and it doesn't really fit, then you've wasted £6. You're better off spending £12 on, a better kit. There's Forces of Valor is in the back of my mind. And I might be way off here and getting the wrong lot. I've got a feeling that they make kits for war gamers. And I think they do some armor as well. Do they? I might be getting
a few people that have said that, and I think that is not the case. I think somebody said, "Oh, they clip together." As far as I can see, they're not. They do some. You see, that's what originally what I thought. Forces of Valor, is this like a war game scale or something? And it doesn't appear to be. They do some die-cast stuff. They're quite a weird company in the things they do, and they don't do very many model kits. But I couldn't see any. But it's also out of Hong Kong. So, how many popular war games come out of Hong Kong? I think it's as many as you can name.
Yeah,
none. But it does have a very war game sounding name. Although somebody was like, I refuse to use the spelling. VALOR. It's like, well, that's the company name. They're not misspelling it. They've used the American spelling, and I suggest perhaps they use the name Waltersons as well because they don't sound Chinese. Yeah. So I think they might be like cheap kits to sell to a, US market or a Western market, let's say. Probably to toy shops as much as, given that they do some die-cast as well, as much as anything.
But it's got its place in the market, hasn't it? Especially at that price. And if it gets people into the hobby, then that can only be a good thing. They spend £6 on that. They enjoy it. They don't really care what it looks like. And they go, oh, I fancy another one. They start doing a bit of research. They find out what's out there, and then a couple of years down the line, they're got spray booths, airbrushes, compressors, and they're throwing a whole ton of aftermarket at a Tamiya 32nd scale Mosquito or something.
Yeah.
So it can only be a good thing if that's what it leads to. But it could be pretty annoying if you're the next stage up from your beginner, and you go, well, that's a bit of a bargain, and you go, oh, this is shape's all wrong. Do a bit of research, and it's a bit rubbish.
There are a couple of threads I've got in my mind, but I just wanted to address a couple of points. So I mentioned Matchbox there and like their panel lines. Now that wasn't necessarily as disparaging as it sounded. Matchbox, you got to think, are of their time. They were in the 70s. They did survive into the 80s, but mainly they're a 1970s company. At a time when most of the companies were doing, Western companies, I think, were doing raised panel lines and big rivets. So arguably they were ahead of their time in terms of technology. But they're obviously limited by the technology at the time because stainless steel at the time, if you wanted to recess panel line, you'd have to machine that as a raised panel line on the mold. Much easier to engrave it into steel than to mill away all of the rest, especially by hand. Not by CNC is what I mean by not by hand. I don't think there was a guy chipping away at it like Leonardo or something. But Matchbox actually, I think, fall into this category in the 70s. So if we were having this discussion in 1977, say, or 1974, that was 50 years ago, we'd probably be talking about Matchbox because Matchbox were kind of founded on the principle of, pocket money kits, and they had fairly low part count. They went together really well, generally.
Yeah.
At least when they were new. Testament to their toolings, Revell are still issuing Matchbox kits as Revell with no changes to them as the My First Diorama and stuff. They're not selling them at pocket money prices. They're selling them at ridiculous prices. But back in the day, they were like a few pounds. I think there were a few. I think in the 90s you could pick up Airfix kits, Matchbox kits for like £350 in the UK. And they had that kind of reputation. They were, they had thick transparencies, the accuracy of the panel lines, if you want to call panel lines accurate, because they're not really anyway. But they went together really well. They had some gimmicks like the 2 or 3 color plastics, you put together, appealing to the younger modelers. But a lot of us look back on Matchbox with a very fond memory. They certainly went together better than a lot of contemporary Airfix and Revell kits.
Definitely.
So again, I think in terms of the value proposition, they were cheap, relatively cheap, but actually I think they were ideal at the time for beginners. And as a beginner back then, I loved them.
Yeah, and they also did their more expensive things, didn't they? The 32nd scale Spitfire, the 109, the Licensor, and then bigger kits like the Privateer, which is still highly sought after now. So it was a good. It was sort of 90% as you describe, and then they had the 10% big ticket items, which I always wanted that Spitfire for Christmas. Never got it when I was little.
Is it the Mark 21 or something?
Something like that, wasn't it? It was late war.
I've got one if you want one.
Well, yeah.
Somebody has. It is secondhand, obviously. Somebody has started to paint the pilot.
Oh,
but that's all.
Well, I'm sure once this Sea Harrier's out the way, I'm onto a 32nd scale Griffin engine Spitfire. Anyway,
nice.
but it's the conversion, that laminar flow designs conversion with the Tamir kit. So arguably that's going to be easier than getting that Matchbox job up to snuff.
Probably. I have seen that Matchbox kit though made into some really nice models.
Yeah,
and with not a huge amount of work done to it.
No.
I mean, yes, you could almost rebuild the kit, but you could do that with almost any kit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Question from Julian, which is a good one. Cheap in terms of quality or price, or do they go hand in hand? So I think of a cheap kit as cheap kit. So regardless of what's in the box, cheap in terms of money. Now, what I would call, from my unfortunate corporate indoctrination over the years, as I'm going to use those air quotes again, value proposition, is the value for money. What are you actually getting in the box for that price? Cheap is one of those words that, as a commercial person, we were always taught to avoid, because it implies if something's cheap, something feels cheap, it's a kind of a derogatory thing. Whereas something is good value, you're like, oh, I'm getting something more than I would expect for my money. So there is some nuance in the word, but what I'm saying in terms of cheap is cheap in terms of money. So something which is probably under £10 if you're thinking of a 72nd scale kit. Think of the Airfix starter kits that are available from Aldi and Lidl. Those are considered cheap kits. And in 48 scale, if you can buy something for £12 to £15, that's pretty cheap for 48 scale aircraft. Similar for a 35th scale tank or AFV, that kind of money. Sort of less money than you would expect to spend on something of that size or nature, I think, is what we're talking about. And in terms of the quality, that I think is the variable piece, right? So if we think about some of the, like, the general cheap kits, the cheap kits that I would myself, recommend to people that come in the shop, they tend to be Airfix starter kits. And the reason is that most of them are recent toolings. In fact, all of them are recent toolings. The ones that are less recent tend to be gift sets. So there's a way to distinguish them. But most of the starter sets in general that are up there, and the gift sets that are up there, at $11.99 RRP, I sell them for 11. Are recent toolings that go together pretty well. They're actually suitable for beginners, or one or two models under your belt, and for intermediate modelers to use as that, I won't say paint mule, but to try different things out, or just to I want a fairly easy build, and maybe I want 3 Spitfires and I want to do them all as different schemes. I'm not going to use the supplied paints or anything, but it's still cheap.
Yeah. The other ones are really good. Are the Hobby Boss ones.
Yes.
And I built the Yak. I'm going to say 3, but it might not be the 3. 72nd scale. It was cheap. 2-piece wing, or might have even been a 1-piece wing, 1-piece fuselage.
Yeah.
And it went together exceptionally well. And the detail, is not a great deal in the cockpit. 1-piece canopy on the top, but the panel lines, it's not that many panel lines on a Yak, obviously, but it was really finessed, and it looks fine. It competes with the other stuff in my cabinet.
Yeah, and I think if you just want to buy something, because a lot of people don't enjoy the building process as much as they enjoy the painting process. So if you're just looking, and massive generalization, but it's quite often armor modelers who are wanting to do an aircraft, but they don't really want to do the whole cockpit bit and mess around with all those pieces. And it's like, right, okay, if you can buy something which is, I don't have to do much of that messing around, and I can mainly concentrate on the painting and the weathering and making it look how I want it to, then that's a bonus. So I think that, and that doesn't just have to go for armor modelers, and I say it's a mass generalization, but it goes for anybody, right, who just wants, I could spend a couple of months doing I'm going to move this 148 Beaufort out of the way because otherwise I'm going to damage it. But I'm not going to spend a long time doing my nice 148 detailed ICM kit. I just want to quickly do a 1/72 scale Spitfire, throw it together, and then spend some time experimenting with color, experimenting with oil washes, or pre-shading, or post-shading, or whatever it is, or all of the above. So I don't want to spend a lot of time doing all that, the building steps. I'm not going to build a Zokamura kit to do that.
No.
When an $8.99 little Airfix starter set, I can just chuck the paints away, will do.
Yeah, I mean, I bought that Yak as a, they've got a vast range, and I just thought, well, I fancy a Yak in my collection. I'm just going to see what these are all about, and I was really impressed. I built it in a weekend, start to finish, and not quite in 1 hour, but I was thoroughly impressed. Now, would I do another one? Well, it depends on the subject. If I want a 72nd scale Mustang, I'm not going to buy the Hobby Boss. I don't even know what they're called, junior kits or basic kits, or whatever they're called. I'm just not, because I don't want, I want something that's nice in the cabinet. And I chose the Yak because I knew it wouldn't have many panel lines. And I knew it would be, a very simple, easy kit to put together, and it ticked the box and achieved the aim.
Yeah. I think a lot of this, and you can scale this, I think, with any model, comes back to that horrible value proposition phrase is, are you getting what you expect out of the money that you're putting in? So if I buy a kit for £6, I have a certain expectation. It's pretty damn low. So the kit doesn't have to do much to impress me at that level.
No.
If I'm spending twice that on the same size of kit, I do expect it to be better. If I spend 3 times or 4 times that, again, I'm talking about the same size kit, I expect it to be exponentially better. I expect it to be, very finely engraved, fit perfectly, et cetera, et cetera. And when it doesn't, then I feel I don't get a good feeling about that kit already before I even start doing something. If I opened up Dora Rings' Fairy Delta 2 and it had loads of flash all over it and no PE and the decals were all creased, I'd be like, why have I just paid 20 quid for this?
Yeah. Or like Kinetic Sea Harrier, it looks lovely on the screws, and then you start trying to put it together. But at least I knew what I was getting myself into. Now, other people may not, and they go, "Oh, Sea Harrier, Falklands anniversary." I remember, Brian Hanrahan on the telly. They counted them. I counted them all out, and right, inspired. I'm gonna get that, and then they really start to struggle.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many of those Kinetic Sea Harriers are on shelves of doom all around the place. I bet it's quite a lot.
Yeah, those projects that you think, oh yeah, I'm really excited about this, and you start, and then you immediately run into some problems, some prep issues and things, and you just think, yeah, I'm going to put this away because I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I'll do it when I feel up to it, and that day, is either many years away or never happens.
Yeah. And if it's cheap and you've had that, then you might be tempted to file it in the bin rather than on the shelf because it's cheap.
Yeah, or just give it away. It's just like, see somebody at your local model club or online or whatever, and it's just like, oh, I bought this, I started it, I'm not enjoying it, it's a bit of meh, do you fancy it?
Yeah.
I only spent whatever, so I'm not expecting. You spent 60 quid on it. That's less like, I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but there was a certain emotional investment in the £60 that isn't there with 6.
Yeah, exactly.
So good evening to everybody who keeps popping in and saying welcome. Hello, I am keeping my third eye on the chat, which means that I stop at these points and look at it because I don't really.
They did a song, Third Eye.
Yes, I did see the comment about your T-shirt.
I won't show them the back because you'll get demonetized.
So a couple of people here. Nick says, don't have enough knowledge to know if the model is accurate as long as it looks right. I think a lot of us go by that rule. So yeah, for Lancaster has 2 engines. Well, it's a Manchester then, isn't it? Or a Tiger with a Challenger turret is wrong. Yeah. So ultimately, again, I think we always come down to this. Modeling is for your enjoyment, not for anybody else's, unless you're going into a competition or displaying or, fool enough to start a YouTube channel, I guess. Then other people's opinion of your modeling doesn't really matter as long as you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
So even those things like a Tiger with a Challenger turret, if you enjoyed making it and that's all it's for, that's fine.
Yeah.
And there was a comment. I don't know whether that's up or down from there. I think it was up because I've missed it. Maybe not. If I miss any of your questions or comments, by the way, if you see somebody else is being read out afterwards, put it in again because I may just miss it. I don't want to keep scrolling up and down because it does slow things down a bit. Question. When browsing online and I see kits cheaper than expected, the first thing that pops into my head is, okay, it's cheap. What's wrong with it? Am I alone in this? I don't think so, Steve. I think it's a natural response. It's our natural cynicism creeping in, right? It's sometimes the case, not always the case. So, for instance, Airfix might have overstocked on a particular item, so they have one of their clearance sales, one of their outlet sales, which personally I hate. Obviously, as a retailer, because it really undermines the relationship between me and Airfix. But if it's a decent kit, and it's easy to find out these days, there are tons of reviews online, unless it's brand new, in which case, why on earth would it be on sale? To find out, is this a decent kit? And again, if it says, well, this is a great kit, but its accuracy is off. If you don't care about accuracy, then that's a great deal for you. If you do care about accuracy, that's not a great deal. What about you, Jamie? Are you suspicious of deals?
Well, the amount of times I've, gone onto eBay and gone, oh, that's cheap, and then clicked on it, and then postage is 40 quid or something, and you go, oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, move on. I guess it's, I guess that's what kept us safe on the plains of Africa, isn't it? A cynicism.
Yes.
Of that. There's analogous to, was that a rustle in the grass or is that a lion? And I just wonder if there's something deep seated within our, our brain here that makes us suspicious. And, if something's not quite right, there's got to be a reason behind it. Is it too good to be true? There's normally a reason why these things are cheap. It's very rare that it's been put up at a price that is a great deal. I had a look on Amazon because obviously it's Prime Day, and I just put a few things in the search, and nothing really popped up. But tools wise, rather than kits, there's some fantastically cheap tools. Some are crap, some are quite good. There's certain airbrushes that are 25 quid, and are brilliant. And they could probably sell them at 4 times the price for the quality of them. So it's not just kits, it reads across into all sorts of other things. But I remember being, now apologies if there's anyone listening or watching from Yorkshire, but it's a bit of a trope, isn't it, that Yorkshiremen are tight. And I was a member of IPMS York when I was up at Linton, and there was an older chap there who would, why am I going to spend $13.99 on a new tooled Edward Spitfire Mark 9 when I've got a 1974 moulding of an Airfix Spitfire Mark 9, and all I have to do is move the wheel wells back 1.5 millimeters to make it more. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And he brush painted, and then he decided he wanted to have a go at airbrushing, and he asked advice, and I said, buy the most expensive airbrush that you're that you can afford and you're willing to pay for. And then he did, and then he came to the club and said, oh, airbrush, I couldn't get on with it. I said, oh, let's have a chat about it then. And it turned out that rather than spend £1.80 or £2.30 or whatever a pot of Tamiya paint is in the thinners, he'd found this sort of cheaper, almost like poster paint that was 99p. Well, I'll do that and I'll thin it with tap water. And then he went, oh, airbrushes are crap. And I was like, oh, my goodness me. So
The phrase of a bad workman always blames his tools springs to mind for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. But the fact that he wouldn't, he put his hand in his pocket for the airbrush, but he wouldn't put his hand in the pocket for paint. He said, well, rather than buying 10 of these crap paints, you could have bought 3 or 4 Tamiya paints and a little bottle of X20.
Yeah.
And you'd probably go, oh yeah, that's really good, and then you'd be away. But no, sold his airbrush, obviously.
So Julian says, is the phrase "you get what you pay for" not always correct then? So I would say there is a correlation, right? But it is not necessarily a linear one. And it's a bit like the world of finance, I would say. Past performance is not an indicator of current or future performance, right? Now, generally, your gut says, but it should be, and it should be, but we all have known, Airfix have made a great kit, and then they'll make a stinker, less so in recent years, but we can all look at manufacturers that have done that, that have made great kits, and, they've got their dog kits, the ones where, the Friday afternoon kits where the designers were off and, the stable boy designed the kits or something. The other thing is, and I think we should make a distinction between a cheap kit, and there's a point from Mark Sixsmith I want to come back to in a second. A cheap kit is not the same as a bargain, right? So Tamiya are especially good at this, I think. Tamiya price their kits by their tooling age. Again, not a direct linear relationship, but I think somebody mentioned this further up in the comments. A 1/48 Focke-Wulf 190, like the A or in fact the D from Tamiya, is pretty cheap. They are sub £20 for a 1/48 scale aircraft. The 1/72 Spitfire, the Mark 1, is about £12. It's the same, almost the same price as an Airfix kit. Same with their P51D, the 109, the 109E. These were all kits that were tooled around the 90s, early to late. The Beaufighter is like a mid-90s kit, 48 scale, beautiful kit. Again, it's not very expensive. If you buy a brand new Tamiya kit, if you buy a 1/48 scale F35 A or B, you're paying £70 to £100 for it. Very different proposition, very different kit. So Tamiya's pricing strategy is very different from most manufacturers. In fact, I think any other manufacturer. So when you're comparing across manufacturers, those same rules don't apply, right? So if you compare the Tamiya kit with an Airfix kit, the Airfix kit will actually look expensive. What you're actually getting in the box is different, but the Tamiya kit is still very, very good and can hold its own against the modern Airfix kit. That isn't necessarily the case for like a Revell's not a good example. Academy. The 1990s Academy kit compared to a modern Academy kit is very different. And yet the pricing structure doesn't really reflect that. So this is the murky waters, because a manufacturer can choose to do their pricing however the hell they like. Now, to us, a pound or a dollar is the same value, whatever. So that's very confusing, because then we come and, much like I did in my video comparing the 1/32 scale Revell Corsair with their 1/32 scale Spitfire, they're about the same price. It's the same company, vastly different in both the age of the tool and the quality of what you get inside. But it's cost you the same amount of money. So why aren't you getting the same? You know, this is why Scalemates is such a boon to us all.
Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it?
But it's not to say that £16 Corsair, well, it was 32, but in the 50% off price sale that they did at Hobbycraft. At £16, at 1/32 scale Corsair, as a project, if you want to try some stuff out, like I want to try rescribing an aircraft. You know, I want to, okay, go and buy one of those crappy old kits. You know, I want to scratch build a cockpit. Well, that's an ideal kit to do that because you can't really use what they provided. I want to use an aftermarket engine. Again, ideal because the blob they give you to put in the front is not an engine. If you want a convincing replica of a Corsair, I suggest you go elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So a bit horses for courses, but do you get what you pay for? Not always true. There's a rough correlation, but it's not linear by any respect.
Well, I remember when the Qatari Spitfire came out, and I made a video on it because I was really annoyed with the internet. Oh, I've done it now. The internet, because there were quite a few people moaning that it was £90, and it didn't come with an engine. And personally, I don't want an engine because it'll be undersized anyway. It won't be as detailed as a resin one, and it's just going to complicate the build because I'm going to do it buttoned up anyway. And the obvious comparison was with the Tamiya kit and the Tamiya Spitfire, the 9 or the 8. But that's 130, 140 quid, and it comes with an engine. So to me, that's about right then.
It's about the same, yeah.
And so, oh yeah, but the Tamiya Spitfire was less than £100 when it came out. Well, yeah, because that was 14 years ago, or whatever it was.
Yes, yeah. People forget inflation exists.
Yeah.
So,
you know, and I think, and I've not even seen the Qatari Spitfire in the flesh. I'm hopefully getting one. I'm hopefully getting it for the channel, but I'm waiting for the Mark V because that's my preferred mark, and I'd like to do a Malta one like I did in 48. But I think that's a fair price for a modern, well-engineered kit with the DNA of wingnut wings behind it. So there's a hint to the quality that you're going to get, and you're probably not going to get your fingers burned by shelling out 90 quid for that kit. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
And if you want an engine, get an aftermarket engine for it.
Exactly.
And stick it in. Yeah.
I mean, for example, I mentioned, you could buy, and again, an entry-level Matchbox kit. So I'm talking about like the Jagdpanzer 4 L70, for instance, was about £4, like £3.50, £3.99, something like that. In what that'd be about 1994. Today, that would cost you about £8. Which is still on the cheaper side, but if you think you can get an Airfix starter kit from Aldi or Lidl for £8, that includes paint and glue and a brush, and is probably a better kit.
Yeah,
those Matchbox kits. That's about right. A lot of people will say, well, kits are getting more expensive. Well, if you take that, the Comet from, is it the Comet or no, it's the Cromwell from Airfix. It's £11. Yeah. Well, that's more than 8. That's more than the equivalent £8. Yeah, but it's a better kit. If you're looking and comparing something like an ICM, like 1/48 scale Marauder, with the old Monogram 1/48 scale Marauder. So you get 2 Pratt & Whitney double wasps in that kit. You get a full interior, and it's a nicer kit, and it builds beautifully. Yeah. You can't compare that to the Monogram kit, which does none of those things.
Exactly.
On a one-to-one basis.
Yeah.
Mark Sixsmith mentioned this, though, which I think is a pretty relevant statement. Here in Czechia, what is cheap in the UK is, sorry, Czechia. We would say the Czech Republic because it's easier in English. In Czechia, what is cheap in the UK is quite pricey here. We earn about a third of what you do, so £20 for you is equivalent to 60 for us. And that's a really important point, right? So, and I've said it in the past, modeling is a luxury hobby, you know. It's a spare income thing. It's very much why it's in the sort of Western and, you know, rich Asia Pacific regions rather than, you know, when I was looking at global markets for the Airfix video, for instance, you know, I wasn't looking at Africa because it's just not viable for somebody who's worrying about where they get clean drinking water from or earns like $1 a week, because then something like an Airfix kit becomes vastly expensive. Now, obviously, that's not quite the extreme in the Czech Republic, we should hope. But when we look at Eastern European manufacturers, you know, traditional historical ones like no, PM is Turkish, isn't it? But there are a lot of Czech and Polish manufacturers that I can't recall because there are so many of them. But like the old KP.
Yeah.
Now, KP isn't what it used to be. Again, they've improved drastically. But the old KP kits and things like the old A model and AZ model, and a lot of these that the old historical Warsaw Pact kind of you know, Cold War era companies, after the Cold War, when they started becoming more widely available, that didn't change the toolings overnight, but they were cheap. So you can buy for instance, going to the Turkish example, a PM kit. Again, back in the 90s or early 2000s, a PM kit of a what if subject, like a TA 183, for instance, would be maybe £3, you know. The closest next to it is kind of like what, the Tamiya kit, which, you know, at the time was probably 12, you know, a factor of 4 difference. Now, that has massively narrowed because to me, you don't really change those prices much, sans inflation. But there's a very different value proposition. Are you going to work a bit harder on that PM kit to make it acceptable? At the time, that's what I did. Would I do that now? No, absolutely
not. No.
So I'm at a different stage in my modeling journey. So what cheap kits have you persisted with then? Other than the, you know, the nice experience of the Hobby Boss entry level kits, whatever you want to call them. I think the Easy Build or something they're called, aren't they? Can't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
What cheap kit have you had that you've persisted with and actually produced something of without binning it?
I am now racking my brain. I did Airfix Beaver Classic vintage build. Wow. That wasn't expensive. And I got that one over the line. That was a lot of work. Just trying to think. I tend not to buy cheap kits. As I said right at the beginning, I will fork out more for a better quality kit. I just will. I'll only go down that option if that's all there is. I wanted to do a vintage classic for me and see whether I could improve it closer to, you know, as if it was a modern tool kit. It was let down by the transparency, so I didn't necessarily achieve the aim. But the airframe was all fully rescribed, riveted, and I was quite pleased with it. But I just don't go there. I don't have a big stash by relative standards, and it's full of top quality kits, really. I built the Revell FW-190 in 72nd scale. I built that because it was before Edward released theirs. And again, I did a full rivet job on it. I knit the canopy off. I think it was an I bought the Academy D9 really for the canopy to replace it on that because that was cheap. But I binned the kit. I just kept the canopy. So yeah, very rare that I actually go out and do that because there's normally a much better option, which is more expensive. And I'm, you know, at the end of the day, I want to enjoy my hobby and enjoy the final result.
Yeah, so I think it's, you know, we've said this many times before, but, you know, what are you hoping to get out of a kit? You know, and the modeling hobby and kind of the world around it, you know, it started off as, you know, something that you would buy from the newsagents and, you know, you'd slam it together, put together and stuff. Kind of evolved from that, and people were scratch building and things. Now it's this huge industry by comparison, even though, you know, arguably it's not as present in people's minds. That isn't because the hobby has got less popular, it's got more popular, but other things have also come in. So, you know, the internet, well, video games in the 80s, that was one of the only times that model production actually plateaued.
Yep.
After a while that recovered in the 90s, it was back up and ever since. But you have the introduction of the internet, you have now phones, which are more powerful than previous computers. You can have everything, you know, the internet, games, all stuff just there. But that doesn't take most people's time all the time because it gets boring, right? Humans are kind of conditioned to want to do different things. You know, that's part of our biology as well. So it isn't that has shrunk, it's that everything else has grown. So it just looks, you know, it gets lost a little bit in that. Back in the 70s, there was less to do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. But
yeah, and I think the sort of everyone sort of, I say everyone, sweeping generalization. You hear it all the time. Oh, you know, kids are the future of the hobby and blah, blah, blah. And I say, no, they're not. The future of the hobby are people in their 30s that the kids are a little bit older. They may be being promoted at work and now they've got a bit of disposable income. That's the target market. And it's how do you reach those people who, you know, who maybe didn't build Airfix kits in their youth. And I'd argue now that people in their sort of 30s now maybe didn't build Airfix kits on a rainy afternoon like we all did.
Yeah.
So it's there for me, and it's only my opinion, I might be way off, but they're the future of the hobby. And, you know, if you can get someone like that to throw a cheap but good kit together, you know, maybe a certain percentage will stick it out and it will become their thing, like it's our thing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm way behind with the chat, but so apologies, I'm getting there. So Michael says, I usually get my kits from eBay auctions. I usually never pay more than $15. However, you need to read the product description closely. I think that is a really important part, not just of eBay. I think eBay kind of heightens that. But there are other platforms out there, Vinted, Gumtree, Facebook Marketplace is a real cesspool. So I saw an auction for I have like lots, you know, the auction lots as one of my search terms in the model category, because you do get big lots of, you know, like 200 kits being sold and stuff, and that's the kind of thing that is economically viable for a shop, less so than an individual. But you do take a bit of a punt on what's in there. I once saw one, I thought, that's really, why is nobody bidding on this? That's super cheap. And I looked and it was just the boxes. It was just like 50 Airfix boxes. And oh, that's the reason.
Yeah.
that's a lot for a bit of cardboard. So
Yeah, blimey.
so yes, caveat emptor in all circumstances.
Absolutely. Read the small print.
Aries Styrene says, as a model shop owner and a bit of an insider, I don't know about that. Do you think Airfix will ever repop the 148 scale Merlin helicopter? I really hope they do. I have no insider information, I'm afraid. In fact, let's make a quick segue to Airfix. Those of you who watched Airfix and Chill on Monday know I'm really pissed off with Airfix. So the Shannon class still hasn't arrived. I sent out 3. I got 3. They got immediately sent out to pre-orders, the first 3 people that ordered it. Heartbreakingly, one of them actually got in touch with me saying, "Where's my Shannon?" And I said, I explained the whole situation with, only 3 came in. I'm waiting for the second shipment. They did a partial shipment to all the retailers and stuff. It's really crappy, but it's Airfix's decision. And then I checked. I wanted to double check because I saw his name. And I thought I recognized the name. I'm sure I printed that label, and he was one of the 3 people, and he was. And I had the Royal. I send everything tracked. And this is a perfect example of why it's a good idea. Royal Mail had delivered it. They had a photo of it on the porch of the thing. But he was away. So what did they do? They stored it in his bin.
Oh, what?
So of the 3 I sent out, 1 was thrown away, unopened. So if you're in a landfill, you might get lucky. Anyway, that was the tragic bit. Of course, this week we heard about the Spitfire 124 scale Mark 8 from Airfix. Now, whatever you think of that release, I think it's a slightly odd one, so close after the Mark 9. But I heard about it. I got an official email from, wasn't my rep because he's on a holiday, it was the guy who's filling in for him. I think it was 12:14 a.m. or p.m. On Monday. I had an email from Jadlam at 10:08 telling me it had been released. It's like, so 2 hours after Jadlam told me, I got the email from Airfix saying, "Oh, we're releasing this, and if you want to order it," it's like, so Jadlam had the information obviously in advance. They still operated this 2-tier system. So if you think I'm an Airfix insider, you're sadly mistaken. However, Airfix rant aside, I'm now calm. I really hope they do the Merlin again. It's one of the most requested kits that I get in the shop. Now, part of that is location. I'm not that far from Yeovilton. So I get a lot of people who have worked on the Merlin, a lot of people who either fly or flew the Merlin, if you like it. And there aren't any current kits of it. Italeri did a 72nd scale kit. It's not currently issued. And of course, Airfix did. So it's impossible to get hold of. And yet it's so requested. So I really hope they do, because they would sell. Absolutely.
I reckon they will.
Yeah. Well,
but I think it will depend on how well the Seeking sold.
Yeah.
If they undershot their target, then maybe they'll go, "Ooh, do we really want to invest in tooling that again or pressing that again?" Who knows? I'd like to think the Seeking did really well, but who knows?
I mean, it got really good. You see, I think the thing is, subject is one part of it. Obviously, scale is another. And with subject, helicopters are not as popular as aircraft.
No.
That is just, a fact. I'm sorry, helicopter modelers, but they are not as popular. Why are there less helicopter museums than aircraft museums? It's because of that, because less members of the public will pay to come and see those exhibits, which is a shame. And as I put out last night, I went to the Western-super-Mare North Somerset model show, I have to get it right, on Sunday. That was held at the Helicopter Museum, just outside Western-super-Mare. Don't worry, you don't have to go to Western-super-Mare to go to it. Apologies to anybody who lives in Weston-super-Mare. But it is outside, just up a roundabout. So you're absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic place. It's got the, as I showed in the video, it's got the last piece of the fairy rotodyne there, which, as I suspected, is all flush riveted, apart from the upper and lower seams where they join the big sections together. So you need to sand your Airfix Classic if you want an accurate model. But it's a great place. It's a great place, and the model show in those sort of places I think are always great. But going back to the original piece about the Merlin, yeah, the Sea King was a great kit. It was widely praised. You know, I thought it was fantastic, and I'm not a helicopter guy. You know, I really enjoyed the build. Unfortunately, it was short shot. And I think Airfix need to think about, if things aren't doing so well for them, why that is. And I don't think the choice of subject and their design is part of that. I think it's more the continued reputational pieces, which they need to fix. You know?
Yeah, and it's telling with the Bulldog, where people were jumping up and down saying the windscreen is short shot, there's another short shot. Actually, it wasn't. It's how it's designed. The real thing was like that. It's asymmetric. But the fact that people jump to that conclusion tells you everything. Now, you know, I guarantee that everybody who works in Airfix doesn't want to mold them in India. They'd much rather do it in the UK, or even, you know, in Europe. But it comes down to money. It is a lot cheaper to do it in India and ship it across. And they've obviously taken the decision that at the moment it's better business to maybe suffer these production issues, because I understand there's warpage on the Chinook with the bulkheads. There
was warpage on the Liberator as well. 2 of my frames were warped.
Right. So
it's a general thing. It is not the tools. It is the way that the injection molds are being handled, which is the production company.
Yeah, they're not allowing them to cool properly before they kick them out.
No, they're not.
And if they can get over that issue, then yeah, it you know, they'll go up again a notch. But
yeah, I think sadly that's a mistake. You know.
Mark 9, sorry, the Mark 8 is tooled, because the Mark 9 was tooled in the UK, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Are they doing that again, or is this one being tooled in India? And is it about £10 more expensive than the Mark 9? I think.
Yes.
So I would guess it was done in the UK, but then maybe they're thinking, well, we're expecting fewer sales with the Mark 8 because a lot of people bought the Mark 9, and are they going to spend another £100 on the Mark 8 as well?
Yeah, which comes back to that point, you know, of so commercially, I'll just say, I've said my piece before, but I'll say it again. I've worked 28 years in commercial, in distribution management, in direct sales management, internationally, you know, so I have some idea of what I'm talking about when it comes to some of these issues. They're making a horrible, horrible mistake. Reputation is so much of the sales of any organization, and it's the most damaging piece when it comes to commercial, and it goes every level. So we were selling over the course of my career, the kind of equipment I've been part of a sales team selling, or leading a sales team selling, has usually been, say, from 30,000 to about 50 to 70,000 pounds as a general rough price. Some a lot more, not really many much less, but that kind of rough piece. And this is into scientific areas, right? So scientists who you would have thought would have made very data-driven decisions. Reputation was a massive, massive part of the decisions because people are people. And if you're a scientist or not, you still have emotional urges and gut feels, and people can be swayed away from data. We lost multi-100,000-pound deals based on people's feelings about things, about our company. So I think Airfix concentrating on, trying to eke out more profit from India rather than renegotiating the deal, getting the tools back and going to Eastern Europe, say, is a massive mistake. But we will see. We will see what the strategy is.
Well, I know investigated going to one or two companies in Eastern Europe, and it wasn't economically viable. It was more expensive, significantly more expensive. So they made the decision not to.
Yeah. I honestly don't believe that. I just don't think they were looking hard enough. I really don't. Anyway, other manufacturers do it. Let's say that. Other manufacturers manage to do this. Other manufacturers, well, let's just call it out. Revell does this. Revell has its toolings, the Revell toolings cast in Poland. Revell is not an investing company in terms of, how it's not kind of spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds on new tools. It's done very little recently. It is owned by an investment company in the same way that Hornby is, so it is profit driven. It has much better business practices. It has a worse reputation in many ways, and yet it's still doing that and being profitable. There is something that doesn't add up in that Hornby Airfix equation. The other part of it is, of course, the Mark 9, which it was 94.99 RRP when it came out. The Mark 8 is 99.99. Which, okay, yeah, with inflation you can accommodate that, so it's roughly the same price. But if that's 94.99 being made in the UK for a 124 scale kit, of the detail it is, and for how much you get, that is actually one of the best value kits I think that Airfix make.
Well, it's the same price as the Qatari Spitfire.
Yeah, but it's a 24 scale with an engine, a very nice engine, I might say. And all those other pieces. So, yeah, there is, and especially looking at Hornby's returns for this year, there is something that doesn't add up in the Hornby Group's maths. They need a good commercial director. I can recommend one. I will do the job for half of whatever the current commercial director is being paid. How about that? That's my offer to Airfix. I will take that job for half the salary, and I can guarantee better results. There we go. That is my Airfix.
It's like a dragon's statement.
Anyway, moving on to slightly more. I won't say serious, because if Airfix were to ring me up tomorrow and take me up on the offer, I would absolutely 100% go for it. They won't, of course. But let's say more plausible pieces, at least. Michael just clarifying, a lot of the kits being sold on eBay are kits being sold by fellow modelers, just sitting out their stashes. Very true.
I don't find them that cheap, though.
No, I don't think so. No, because the thing is, a modeler thinning out their stash knows what his stash is worth, or a particular model. And it's quite easy to find out what it's worth because you look on eBay. Or, well, first of all, you can look on ScaleMates and see if a retailer is selling it. If it's not, probably means it's out of production. So then you look on eBay and see how much people are selling them for. And a lot of the kits on eBay are high priced and not selling. So what do? Sell it for £10 cheaper, and you're probably in the right ballpark. So yeah, they're not bargains in that respect.
No, they used to be when eBay was first a thing, but now it's 10% less than retail is what they're on there for.
Yeah. So Aaron makes an interesting comment: buy cheap, buy twice. It's so in a sense, it's accurate in that sometimes you'll buy cheap and it'll be rubbish and you'll have to buy it again. However, with some cheap kits, like that Waltersons kit, if it fits okay, yeah, you could buy 2 for the price of an Airfix kit, which allows you to do different experimentations or, different schemes, or depending on what you're looking at. So again, cheap isn't necessarily bad. Again, think about what you're trying to get from a kit, what you want. It could be useful.
Yeah, again, I mean, I've recently bought the Hobby 2000 A4 Skyhawk in 72nd.
So whose kit is that?
That's for Gmi.
Yeah.
So that'll be probably from, I don't know, early 90s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s, most for Gmi stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. And in the box, it's beautifully molded. It's very refined. It hasn't got the the level of detail that you'd expect now, but the airframe, when I bought a resin cockpit for it and blah blah blah, because I always do, but the airframe is a lot more refined than the Airfix A4. Now, I'd like to think if Airfix were going to tool an A4 now, it would be at least on a par, maybe even better than it now. But then the Hobby 2000 A4 is more expensive. I don't know, 50% more expensive than the Airfix kit is.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm willing to pay that. It comes with cartograph decals, same as Airfix. But I know I'm going to get a more refined result. But then I bought the Airfix Buccaneer in 72nd when it came out, because really that's all there was. And I had to do a lot of work getting it to the refinement. I sanded all the panel lines, rescribed them, or sharpened them up with the scriber, and was really pleased with the result. But it took a lot of work. If Fujimi or Hasegawa had done one in that period, and Hobby 2000 had released it, I'd probably be tempted to get one of them. But I think with Airfix is they're getting better every year. And I got the Bulldog, the B24, and the Chinook all in one big box. And by looking in, I haven't built any of them yet, but they look absolutely stunning in the box. I've got no short shots from what I can see. No warpage in my B24 from what I can see. I think I've got a little bit of warpage in the bulkheads of the Chinook. But I only know that because I now know it's a problem, so I've had a closer look. But they are beautifully stunning kits. Now,
I just wonder, again, we're kind of dwelling on Airfix, which it's just
I just want to do a bit of a chuck up because I love Airfix, and and I know a couple of the guys there.
I mean, this is the thing, though, isn't it, Jamie? That the Airfix guys, the designers, the people who sit there and do all the stuff are great. And I think Hornby as a group is doing them a disservice by having the stuff tooled in India, bringing along all these QC issues, which are really, out of their control. Now, who actually makes those decisions? I don't know. I'd give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's a Hornby decision rather than an Airfix specific one, because I know Hornby are also moving some of their rail injection stuff out to India as well. So I presume it's a group decision.
Yeah.
And the designer's making, I've spoken to Chris on a couple of occasions. He's a great guy. He really knows his stuff. He's passionate about what he does. He creates, he did the Seeking. Fantastic, and I just feel like he's being let down by all of this. And you think, well, are they going to get themselves? We spoke at the beginning of this discussion about Dragon, where Dragon were in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, when they were a fairly small, fairly new company, beautifully molded kits that just didn't fit. I think the Airfix reputation over the last couple of years has been Airfix is doing really nice kits if you get a good one, which is not the intent.
No.
Sure, the guys at Airfix want every kit to land there and have that reliability, and you only have to look at who are the most successful model companies. The gold standard is Tamiya, and yes, Tamiya have occasional short issues and stuff, especially in their older kits. I've done a couple of their older kits. I'll mention again, the Lotus 49 was not well either. But that was a long time ago. If you look at their general production kits now, I mean, I have never had an issue with a post-80s Tamiya kit. And yes, they do exist, but the incidence of them is rare.
Yeah.
But
at least Airfix have changed their plastic now for a better plastic, rather than that soap
stuff. Whatever it was.
Were you? And the plastic's really nice, and the darker grey really shows up that how refined the surface detail is now. And the internal detail. The sharpness of molding now is, I'm sure all the designer guys and the production guys are now going, right, this is what we've wanted to do for the last X years, and now with this new plastic and the tooling that we're getting now is they're really pleased with it. I'm sure they are.
It's one of the things they spoke about at that Seeking Press Day, how they create the toolings. CNC is the start of it, and then they do electrospark welding for all tiny stuff. It's like, I'd never heard of that before. They talked about it and went through the process and stuff. I looked at it afterwards to have a look at it. It's like, wow, this is some cool technology, but it enables them to do some amazing things. Yeah. Which again, I couldn't be a designer at Airfix because one, I'm not talented, and two, I couldn't take the frustration of having something that I'd worked on and produced really well, a word that would get me demonetized, by a third party, taking those tools and mucking them up. Not mucking the tools up, but mucking what's produced out of them up. And then that reflecting on me, and people coming saying, "What have you done here?" And it's like, well, it wasn't me, it was that guy, But that doesn't help at the end. So.
I'm really hoping that by continuing to use India, they're building their profit to a point where they can go, right, now we can move it in-house, or
sadly they're not, though.
Outsource it somewhere better. And we're now we can invest in that now, because we've invested in India, we've got the profits, and now we can reinvest that in and hopefully eliminate some of these QCs and still have a sustainable, viable, successful.
That would be the dream. Sadly, they're not making a profit as a group. And unfortunately, you can't split Airfix from the rest of the Hornby group. Because, of course, they are owned by Phoenix Asset Management, who are going to look at the entire group performance. And if they divest stuff, it won't be Airfix that they're divesting. So those of you who think, oh, if only Airfix could be owned by somebody else, if it's the most profitable part of it, they won't be divesting it. They'll divest other stuff, like Scale Electric or whatever. Now, that might get them into the place where they can do that, but that, I suggest, is going to be, well, one, unlikely, and B, a way off. There was a question here. Question: I bought a few unbranded kits from China. Ooh, you daredevil, you. Do you guys have any idea who makes them? They have been shockingly good builds. The Chinese market is difficult because I do know a lot of the manufacturers. So here's an example. I have currently on my, let's call it shop workbench, one of the worst kits, I think possibly the worst fitting kit I've ever attempted to make. And that is an ex-trumpeter tool of the SU-27 in 48 scale. It's a huge kit. it's got really nice surface detail. It just doesn't fit at all. It's in any way. It's actually an SU-35, the SU-35/37, the prototypes, which had thrust vectoring nozzles, and they had the canards. And then they stripped out the canards when they went to production, SU-35. Now, what Trumpeter did, in a move that I can't explain, is they just gave you little fillets. They had another sprue which had little fillets to stick onto the side of what is, of course, an aerodynamically smooth frame. So you then have like the thing going down to go up to go down to one. So you've got to fill like a huge area to produce those little canards at the side. So it was pretty bad as the Trumpeter kit. It was then either sold or loaned to a sort of rebranded company called I think they're called Mini Hobby Model, something like this. There's a triangle logo which has little planes on each axis. If you ever see one of those, do not buy them because they are horrible. There's a company called, or was a company called Science Treasury, which tells you that it's like some weird Japanese transliteration, Chinese transliteration, which got some old Hasegawa molds, like a Stuart and the Churchill and 70-second scale kits. They remolded them in horrible. I don't know what they'd done to the toolings because nothing fit. I don't know whether they they wouldn't have even scanned them, took a plasticine imprint of them and then reproduced them or something, because they were horrible, horrible, horrible kits. So it is a bit of a lottery. Now, if you've got really good ones, it could be that they are produced by a company like Meng or the Ryfield model. Insert your choice of Chinese manufacturer here, and just rebadged as an unbranded name. So unless you've got the actual kits, pictures of those, I'd say it's almost impossible. But ScaleMates is your friend. Take a look at what say if I was trying to find the SU-27 or SU-35, I'd look it up on ScaleMates. If I couldn't find the exact one, you'll find some 48 scale ones, and then you can just look at the box art, because typically these rebranders just reproduce the box art on what looks like a bad photocopier with a Canon printer which is out of toner on one color. What about you? Do you know any particular unbranded Chinese manufacturers?
No. Never seen them.
Yeah, they. If you ever see a brand that you don't recognize, it's almost certain, not 100% certain, but almost certain they are probably just a retooler. So either they have borrowed the tools from somebody or bought some cheap tools from a company that went bust or something, and then just impressing these things and putting them out without doing any work. They're generally to be avoided, and those can be cheap kits. So that is definitely, I would say, a cheap kind of manufacturing thing that is best avoided.
Yeah,
the retoolers. Julian makes a very important point. We all need to like this video to help the YouTube algorithm of Alex. Thank you very much, Julian. Appreciated. So sadly, it doesn't look like we're going to get Jen on tonight, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But hopefully we will manage to get it together at another night. And if we're going to put this Waltersons group build or whatever it's going to be, challenge or something, we'll get some details on that. Griffo makes a comment. It really annoys me when people complain about kits simply because the manufacturer chose a different design philosophy than someone else, like the Qatari and Tamiya Spitfire, as said. Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed at how many people think that manufacturers make models only for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like they're not a business. They're providing a
How dare they?
solely for that particular individual.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some manufacturers make some odd choices, right? And you can kind of take a step back, or at least I hope most of us can take a step back and try to think, well, what were they thinking of? Again, let's take the Airfix Mark 8 Spitfire here. Okay, so it's the third most produced variant of Spitfire. Okay, so they made about 1,600 of them. So the Mark 9 was obviously the most produced, even though it's supposed to be an interim version. The Mark 5 was the next most produced, which was also supposed to be an interim version. So there we go. The majority of Spitfires were actually temporary. The Mark 8 was supposed to be a pressurized version, but there's Mark 7, obviously. And it was just like, no, let's not pressurize it. Let's just use it as it is. So kind of interim as well. But it's not terribly common in a lot of modeling circles. It was mainly shipped to the Far East, as we called it at the time, and Africa, Middle Eastern Africa. It was used most by other air forces as well, or it was one of the most used marks by other air forces, I should say. So the Australian Air Force, the US, for instance, and others, which is, I mean, to me, the impression I got of the Mark 8, and this is a personal impression, is that we tended to give the aircraft that weren't very good to our friends during the war. It's just like,
the Mark 8 was better
this
than
is
the
a
Mark
great.
9, but
Sorry?
it was better than the Mark 9.
Yeah.
It was a cleaner
Well,
airframe.
Depends on what version.
It had more range because it had the fuel tanks in the wings. It was a cleaner airframe. I'm pretty sure they changed the angle of incidence of the wing, so it was less draggy. And it was a better airframe, but it was more complicated to build.
Yeah, they also made 3 versions of it. So a pilot was asked which was the best Spitfire, and he said a Mark 8, but only the ones with standard wings. So he said the Mark 8 with the longer wingtips was one of the worst aircraft he'd ever. And it's amazing, isn't it? Right, it's the same aircraft. It's just one has slightly longer wingtips, and he was just like, I won't ever fly that thing. You know, a small change like that can have such a massive impact. So yeah, it was, and they had different engines, of course. Over the, I think it was the 65 to the 71 Merlins they had. So I think the Mark 8s were quite a varied bunch in there. I mean, it wasn't a small production run. 1,600 is more than some production aircraft got in their entire range for others. But yeah, to me, it strikes me as a bit of an odd choice, the Mark 8, because it is that slightly, I won't say less well known, but in terms of, like, let's call them lay modelers, because they are still aware of, you know, different marks of Spitfire and stuff. Everybody knows the Mark 9 and Mark 5.
Yeah.
And the Mark 1, even though it wasn't that produced, it was the original. So it's like Spitfire Mark 1, the 5, and the 9 typically are the ones that people know, and then people kind of are aware of the Griffin engined ones, which they don't really know the marks of, just that they've got the Griffin engine in, so they look different, you know, with the blister canopies. The Mark 8 is that sort of more, almost like a purist's Spitfire. You know, it's the Spitfire for people who like Spitfires before they were popular. And in a lot of ways,
there's got to be more varied color schemes for a Mark 8 than a Mark 9, I'd say.
Well, I don't know, because
if you had all the foreign ones, you got
did, but then the Mark 9 was so ubiquitous that it ended up everywhere, didn't it? So.
Yeah, and you got the Far East, like you say, desert ones. There were desert
the
ones.
Mark 9 that I still think the Mark 9 that Spitfire, the Airfix did a couple of years ago was one of their best moves. And I don't mean just in the fact that it was a nice kit. Although I did see somebody who said they had problems building it. I'm just like, you must have got a bad one. But also, if you look at the decal schemes in that, it's got what, 5, I think. It's got the French one. It's got the American African one, which I was so tempted to build. But unfortunately, I put it up to the vote of the people, and they chose Johnny Johnson's. And yeah, that always only 4. I think maybe 4 or 5. You got at least 2 RAF ones and 2 in foreign service. A real spread of potential, different camouflage, different schemes. I mean, kind of like you could do at least 3 Spitfires there. You know, I was quite tempted because the French one has clipped wings as well. It's an LF, and it's like, that's quite nice too, but it is French, so.
But they weren't going to do Johnny Johnson's, and it was right at the last minute when, they'd had a bit of feedback, and everyone was, you have to do Johnny Johnson's. You can't do Johnny Johnson's. So they did Johnny Johnson's.
Yeah.
Or one of his. Yeah.
Well, he flew that for, I think it was the longest one he flew. Anyway, I think he only flew 2 Mark 9s, actually. I think he flew, that one was his first, because he said, I read his memoir, I can't remember what it's called now.
Full Circle.
But well worth the read.
Yeah, Full Circle it's called.
Well, I think I might have read a different one, because he did publish several.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had that one when he became wing commander of the Canadian squadron, and he took it over. I think it went all the way up to D-Day, and then just before D-Day, I think he transferred. Can't remember now. But he never got shot in that aircraft. Never got shot.
Yeah, in fact, he only got shot once, and that was a few bullet holes, and that was his own fault because he misidentified some aeroplanes as one of his squadrons. So he went, "Oh, there's my squadron," and he rolled out in front of them, but it was a squadron of Germans, and he was lucky they were such a poor shot, and that was the only time his aeroplane got hit.
Oh, question. Jamie, have you flown a Spitfire? My friend got up in one of the 2-seaters from Biggin Hill 3 weeks ago for his 70th birthday.
I bloody wish I'd flown a Spitfire. And I'm going to do it because one of my friends from flying training, Scoff, who ended up on Harriers and then became a test pilot, flies Spitfires for one of those organizations. I don't know which one. I don't think it's the bigger one. I think it's the one out of Goodwood. It used to be called Bolt B, but they changed their name. I don't know what they're called now. And I have to do it. I have to. I'm hoping I'm going to get mates rates, but I very much doubt it. But for I think it's £52,000, which is an eye-watering amount of money. If you have a PPL, you can get a type rating.
Wow.
And your last flight on the course is in the single-seater.
Wow.
If you're good enough.
Yeah.
It's not guaranteed, but I'm sure I could sell one, maybe 2 of the kids to raise the money to do it. But if not, I'll just go for my 20-30 minute jolly. But I've got to do it. I just have to. A very good friend of mine used to fly all the kit out of Duxford for Stephen Gray's outfit. Sadly, no longer with us. We were both instructors at Berks and Heath. And on a Monday, you'd say, "Oh, Al, how was your weekend, mate?" And he'd go, "Oh, flying an aeroplane that you'll never ever fly, Like, he used to really rub it in. You know, I mean, he used to be a professional aerobatics pilot, and that's how we got into the warbird thing. Just an exceptional pilot, and yeah, unfortunately, no longer with us, like I say. But he used to rag me senseless on all that stuff. Like, yeah, oh yeah, well, yeah, I had a race in the P-51B. Coming back from Switzerland from an air show, because my mate was in the Spitfire 14 and he reckoned it was faster, but no, it wasn't. And you're like, why I oughta?
Well, my closest I got to that. Well, last year, my girlfriend teased me saying, "Oh, I think I found the ideal present for your birthday, but it's too much." And funnily enough, I was looking at the Airfix because I was an Airfix club member at the time, and they had their offers, and one of them is I think you get 10% off or something. With that, I was looking at that because I was away. It was almost exactly a year ago, actually, and I was like, "Is it a flight in a Spitfire?" She's like, "How did you know?" It's just like, I love that. It was just because I think it's not very much more to get the 109. I mean, it's not a obviously 109, but like the Avia one, as a chase plane. And it's just like, how cool would that be?
That would be very cool.
But the only other closest kind of, not even claim to fame, is that I did the a good customer at the shop. I've done a couple of commissions. Actually, that Lotus 49 was for him, but the other one was a Seafire, and it was what is it, SX336, the only flying Seafire, for its pilot, who was a friend of his, for his birthday. So
is that Mark 17? Because there's two. There's a Mark 17.
It's a Mark 17, yeah.
3, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's John Beattie, who's ex-Fleet Air Arm, who used to be the boss of Historic Flight.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it might be him. He's been flying historic aeroplanes for donkeys. He was the one who he force landed the Sea Fury when it hit the tree and ripped the wing off, and he bailed out of a Sea Fury when they had an undercarriage problem. Right.
They might have given the Seafire then, if there's only one.
Yeah, but that was a very long time
ago. Mark says, "Do you have a release date for the Man's Magic? Man's Magic, I like that. Leveling thinner yet? Sorry, I forget we really officially named stuff. Well, I might rename it now because Man's Magic sounds great." Funny enough, Mark, all the bottles came in this week. So I've actually put a couple of bottles. I made, obviously had some made up, but I need to make it in bulk. So I've got some 100 mil and some 250 mils made up. I just need the labels for them to arrive. So fingers crossed it will be next week. That'll get out in, it'll be in 500, 250 and 100 mil sizes. So if you're not sure, you can order the 100 mil, give it a try. And if you want to go bulk, then I've got 500 mils. Chemically, it's almost identical to Mr. Hobby Leveling Thinner. And seeing as you can't get that, then I made my own. But yeah, Man's Magic. Yeah, they like that. I'll credit you on that verbally, not monetarily, I'm afraid, Mark. But yeah, can't have it all. I now own that IP. The Begin Hill Mob have a real 109. Do they indeed? I remember seeing, was it the G, when the G was flying at shows and then it crashed?
Yeah.
So I've seen a 109 fly. I saw the ME262 replica fly at RIAT last year, which was a kind of lifetime dream come true to see that thing in the skies. Absolutely amazing.
Well, the outfit, I think it's Sywell. I heard it on the We Have Ways podcast. They're getting an F serviceable.
Oh, and it's really?
The only, it's going to be the only airworthy F ever. And by the sound of it, they were chatting to the owner of the company, and the attention to detail that they're putting into that thing sounds.
They should get some modelers to go over and look at the colour of the RLM2 inside. Oh, that's is that the 1938 shade or the late?
Modelers.
Yeah, they probably have a barrier around some tape. No modelers.
Yeah, no modelers allowed. Yeah.
It's funny because the 109 has such a different sound to like a Spitfire, the Merlin engine. There's such a different thing. And you wouldn't think, or piston engines, but yeah, completely different. Amazing. It's a question from Steve. How is the XB70 coming? Did you have to make gallons more sprue goo? Well, funny enough, I have made quite a few batches of sprue goo, but it wasn't directly related to the XB70. But hold that thought, because I was working on it earlier. So here is the Dorito piece. So it had clamps because it still needed more glue. So I have now sanded the underside of all of this. So this is now reasonably smooth. I just need to go through the grades. That's only with I had to go 280 on that. So I need to go through the grades to make it a reasonable finish. I also had to sand. I've now sanded that. I don't know how much filler you can see in there. Hopefully not too much now. I just need to go over that again. Needs a little bit more at the base here. But it's almost at the stage, hence the stream tomorrow night, where I can mate the fuselage to this, put the wingtips on and the vertical stabilizers, canards, and have an almost ready to paint XB70 or B70 as it will be. But
that is not a small model.
It's absolutely enormous.
Yeah.
This is 70-second scale. I mean, it is huge. The winglets are the size of like a Mirage 2000's wings in 70-second scale. They're probably bigger, actually. I mean, incredible aircraft.
There's something very Jerry Anderson about it.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Like I said, I'd love to do, what was it, the Fireflash, the passenger aircraft from Thunderbirds. I think that's cool.
Now, is someone doing that? I think I saw Gary's update, his news channel thing.
There's a Japanese company that does.
Matters. I'm sure he put that up there.
Really? There's another one. I mean, I know there's a Japanese company that does one, but I don't know if there's another one.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm sure it was relatively recent on Gary's thing. I might be misremembering or something. You know, our memory plays tricks on us, especially when your age starts with a 5 these days. But I'm sure he said that it might be a re-release of that one. But it might be a new tool. I don't know.
They're not cheap. That's the main thing with them. Mark says, I don't require loyalty payments. Acknowledgement is price enough for me. Acknowledged indeed. All righty. Well, we are approaching the... Would you like a Firefly, Alex? Still have... So I'm doing a Firefly, the Frog one. I have to have another live stream on that one, actually, and finish that.
A Frog Firefly?
Yeah. Or was it Frog? Yeah, it was Frog. Yeah, it was sent in by a viewer.
No wonder he wanted shot of it.
Actually, yeah. I mean, the kit itself is basic.
Of its time.
It's of its time. Yeah. and better than some of its time as well. I mean, it didn't, principally because it doesn't really have anything inside. It's kind of just got a shelf for the pilot to sit on. And no, it's got a shelf for the navigator radio operator, and then it has actually got a seat, but the seat is as broad as the actual fuselage. It's not separate. So I had to, I kind of scratch built a couple of bits for that and used some etched replacement seats, because you can't see an awful lot anyway in there. But Aaron says, fairly new to modelling. Any suggestions for Fleet Air Arm models? Well, what are you interested in, Aaron? Fleet Air Arm covers quite a lot and quite a long period of time. So,
yeah.
Any top choices from you, Jamie?
Yeah.
Kinetic Sea Harrier?
I'm a hobby. Well, no. Not if you're new to modelling. I'm a hobby Wildcat. Edward Hellcat, if you're looking at World War II. If you're looking at modern stuff, Airfix Buccaneers, 72nd, 48th.
Yeah.
They're very nice kits. Airfix Seeking. What else? Racking my brain now. I've got to say the Airfix Lynx, haven't I? Because that's what I flew in the Fleet Air on.
They're not available now, though, are they?
No. Well, if you can get the original boxing, that's got my Lynx as the B ski with my name on it and my nose up.
I had a couple. I sold them both pretty rapidly.
But Extra Deck will do an 815 squadron sheet, and I gave them a digital copy of the nose art and photographs, and they actually put the photographs in the decal sheet as well, in the instructions. So you can do my links. You just have to go off the market. But what else? Just trying to think now. Some of the trumpeter stuff. If you're not too bothered about accuracy, the Wyvern is a very nice kit and is a funky looking machine. Goes together well, nicely detailed. That's a really good one. Airfix Sea Vixen, if you can get a hold of one. That's a very nice kit. So there's lots to choose from. Fleet Air on.
I have a Sea Vixen. So I got the Sea Vixen and I've got the Javelin, Costa Javelin. Yeah, somebody was in
about the Javelin. The only aeroplane that when you engaged the afterburner at altitude, it actually slowed the aeroplane down. It drew so much fuel that the RPM of the engines dropped.
It's like a very expensive air brake.
Yeah, I know that because my first squadron, when I was on exchange with the Crabs, Royal Air Force, was 25 Squadron up at Leeming on Tornado F3, and we used to have the association do every year. And back then, loads of old boys from the war, both fighter pilots and navigators, mosquitoes, but also some of the blokes from the 50s and 60s as well. It was a very active associations. It was great fun. And that was told to me by a Javelin pilot.
Yeah. The other one I would add to Jamie's list, because I think it's a good list, the Gannet, the Airfix Gannet. It's a lovely kit. Goes together really well. I would say it's, of all the Airfix kits I've built of the new stuff, I would say it's the best engineered kit that they've ever made. Superb.
I hear really good things about that. And if you don't want the expense or size of that, the Trumpeter 72nd one actually is pretty good.
Oh, really? Really?
It's basic, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did hear somebody saying about possibility. Was it on Airfix and Chill, or was it somebody in the shop? Don't know. talking about Airfix releasing a 148 scale AEW version, I'm just like, it's a completely different aircraft. They would have to change so much. Just everything. I mean, the fuselage would have to be completely different.
Well, new fuselage. I think the wings were different as well.
Yeah, the undercarriage was all different. Yeah. So it would be a new model entirely, effectively. I think it would be cheaper to tool a new model than it would be to add bits in, really.
Yeah, but the sword kit is out this month in 48.
The what, sorry?
The sword are doing it. The AW
really?
Gannet, and it's out this month. Yeah.
I wonder if they did that. Whether that was always planned or whether they looked at the Airfix Gannet and just like, if this is popular and people are raving about it, we should do an AEW version because that's, a lot of people are like, oh, I'll wait for the AEW version. And it's like, no, that's not.
I can't see Airfix doing it, especially now Sword have brought theirs out. Well, Sword did it in 72nd, and that's a nice kit. So, it's not okay. You don't just times X% make your tooling and there's your kit. It doesn't work like that. But if you've got all the design and the drawings and you know the shape of it and blah blah blah, then I'm sure it's quite easy to
I mean, it's a lot easier now with CAD-based design. I think ICM, and ICM, I think you'll see some of their subjects produced both in 72nd and 48th, because once you've got the CAD files, yes, you have to change things. You can't just shrink it down, but to a certain extent you can. It's what bits do you keep, or if you're easier to shrink down and simplify than it is to take a 72nd one and blow it up, and what are you going to add, because that's a whole lot of work. But yeah, it isn't as simple as just reducing. If anybody has 3D printed anything, and if you scale a model, it scales everything. So it's not quite the same.
No.
Airfix confirmed they'd have to do a brand new tool. Yeah. I think I may be wrong, but I think that was Airfix politely saying no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I built the old ANS links. I was about 12 and I enjoyed it. Huh? Okay. So that is exactly right, Neil.
Yeah. And they did I saw it on Facebook the other day. They said it's been delayed, but it's out in this month.
Just on the Buccaneer, the 148 Airfix Buccaneers, it's your third kit built, and build was straightforward for me. So just be careful, and this is a nice segue into closing the loop on this discussion. If you see a cheap one on eBay, it could be the older tooling. So they did do one, I think it was in the 90s, around the same time as they did the Lightning. They did, in fact, I think it might have been before the Lightning. They did a 48 scale Buccaneer. I have one. It's not a bad kit. It is not the standard of the current kit.
Nowhere near.
No.
I did build that. That's my first ones I built when I came back to the hobby.
Yeah.
Would have been the late 90s.
Yeah. So it's so if you see a cheap one, just look at when it was tooled. If you don't know, look on ScaleMates, look at the box art. On eBay, it's easy to see something, get excited. Just do your due diligence to avoid disappointment in the future. But yeah, the current ones, if you're buying one from a current store, then it'll be fine. With that, I'll say that nicely rounds us out and nicely brings us up 21:59. We've been going for 2 hours and 3 minutes. I think that's an excellent time to end it for this evening. So I think the overall verdict is cheap has its place. It's not the same as bargains. You can pick up bargains, which are kits which are more expensive that you manage to find at a good price. That's slightly different than a cheap kit. A cheap kit is one there, the recommended price is cheap. Look at what you want out of a build. Do you want to work at it? Do you want to use it as, a quick disposable thing? that you're going to build it quickly and enjoy the painting and things, you don't really care about anything else, that's fine. If you want it to be your masterpiece model, probably worth saving up a little bit, spending a little bit more on something which has a good reputation that you know and cost, 3 or 4 times as much. But doesn't mean that if you spend a lot more, you're necessarily going to get a better kit. You need to do your research. I'll just mention the word Revell there, just in case you're worrying. Or that you necessarily get all the bells and whistles. Qatari Spitfire, no engine. How dare they? But as with always, just go into it with your eyes open, and you probably won't end up disappointed. But thanks for joining me, Jamie. Been a pleasure, as always.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Thanks to everybody in the chat. We'll see you again next time.
Yeah.
Thanks. Cheers, Jamie.
Cheers.